Good evening. This is Business Today on Channel I. On this program, we talk about many insightful topics with individuals with a lot of experience in those relevant industries. Today, we're here to talk about the Sri Lanka Institute of Nanotechnology. And we have with us Dr. Lakshitha Pahalagedara, the Head of Business Development of Slintech. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening.
All right. Now, to start off, I'd like to ask you, what is Slintech exactly and what do you do as a company?
Sri Lanka Institute of Nanotechnology is one of the pioneer research institutes in Sri Lanka as well as in the region. It was established in 2008 and the mandate was to help assist Sri Lankan industries and the other manufacturing institutes to come up with high-tech and high-value products using local raw materials, value-added raw materials.
All right. Now, when we think of the word nanotechnology, it seems like a very advanced subject. Just tell us a bit more about what exactly is nanotechnology.
Nanotechnology is the technology where we work in the extremely small scale, because nanometer is a billionth of a meter.
Okay.
So we are talking about extremely small objects. A nanomaterial is defined as a material of which at least one dimension is in between 1 nanometer and 100 nanometers. So we are working with these small materials. When it goes to the small size, they behave in a different way compared to their bulk materials.
Okay.
So their properties are totally different. It could be their optical properties, mechanical properties, catalytic properties, thermal properties, or magnetic properties. For example, we know gold is yellow in color and it is shiny.
Yeah.
That's why we pay a high price for gold.
Yes.
But when gold goes to its nanoscale, it's red in color.
Okay.
And it shows totally different properties. So that's the beauty of nanotechnology. And so while using nanoscience as a technology, people try to incorporate these extreme properties which are very much distinct from the bulk counterparts for their day-to-day applications.
So because it's in a different scale, it's like a completely different world, and the things that we normally know to be blue or red might in fact be green or purple.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a really interesting field. And I'd also like to ask you, when it comes to renewable energy sources and going green, it's not a question of should we go green, it's a question of when will we actually go green completely. But why has the world taken so long to convert from their regular fossil fuels to renewable energy sources?
One thing is the technology. The second thing is scaling up. Because there are a lot of research going on even at the moment on harnessing renewable energy and also on storing renewable energy, because we all know that Sri Lanka is blessed with sunlight, right? We get a lot of sunlight, at least for 10 hours a day. But the problem is we harness the sunlight through solar panels during the daytime, and our peak is in between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. So the energy that we harness during the daytime has to be stored in a battery so that we'll be able to use that during the peak time. So this battery has to be extremely efficient in terms of the cost, maintenance, and the energy that it can store. So people are doing a lot of research, and on the lab bench you see fabulous stuff. But converting that into a scaled up version or commercialize it has become a challenge. So that's why it has taken a long time to commercialize these stuff. But if you take electric vehicles, Tesla, Panasonic, they do have electric batteries to store energy. So even in Sri Lanka, that's what we are trying to do, because we should not depend entirely on fossil fuels in the future, and we can't do that. It's not about Sri Lanka, it's about the entire globe, because energy is becoming a crisis. So you have to find alternate ways, as you correctly mentioned, to store this energy, harness this energy efficiently and store it.
Okay, so that is actually energy storing. And how much of an impact do you think the actual storage component of this energy has when it comes to obtaining a carbon neutral economy?
Right. We all know fossil fuels, they contain mainly carbon and hydrogen. So whenever we burn them, the byproducts are carbon dioxide.
Okay.
Carbon dioxide itself is a greenhouse gas. So there's a huge impact on the greenhouse effect, the ozone layer, and it's not green at all.
Yeah.
So we have to find other ways where we can use alternate energy sources. The renewable energy is the solution. It could come in the form of solar energy or wind, or in the form of waves in the ocean. But the problem is you can harness them, then where do you store it? So that's the solution that we have. So in order to go for a green world, we need to find ways to store these energies.
Okay. Now you mentioned solar energy using waves from the ocean as well as wind energy. I'd like to know, when it comes to Sri Lanka, which form of energy do you think that we can make use of the most?
We should be able to use all three, but in terms of the quantities, the percentage, we get a lot of solar energy.
Okay.
So that's the easiest way. And there are many programs, even at the moment, which are active, because USAID is working on that. They have a energy program completely focusing on renewable energy harnessing and storage, and there are some plans to have floating solar panels so that we can use our reservoirs to harness this energy.
Okay. Now, how do you plan exactly on creating these rechargeable energy storage devices as well as rechargeable electric vehicle devices, or batteries rather?
Right. Well, there are several solutions that we can target for. Some of them are very close to us. That means that can be easily commercialized. But in some cases, we have to do more research.
Okay.
But the real advantage the country can get is if we use local raw materials. If there is any way to use local raw materials and add value to them, and if we can use these raw materials to enhance the performance of these energy storage mechanisms or energy storage systems, that is the ideal way for Sri Lanka, because in that way we can create an intellectual property by doing research. At the same time, we are creating a market for local raw material. And we have such raw materials which are very active and which has a very high potential. So the closest approach is, we have already proved this. At Slintech, we have improved the lead-acid battery, which is being used in every car.
Okay.
We have improved the performance, the cycle life, the energy capacity that it can store by incorporating the material called graphene. Because graphene can be extracted or developed or produced by using the local raw material, local mineral, which is called graphite.
Okay.
So that could be the beginning. That has already been proved. The only thing is we need to scale that up. And on the other hand, if you talk about electric vehicles, there you have to think about low weight energy storage systems. So lithium-ion batteries are the solution, and that's the type of battery which is being used everywhere. So again, we have to improve the performance, because right now we are focusing on importing electric vehicles.
Okay.
But then again, after 5-10 years, we might need to replace their batteries. So in that case, we have to have a solution. Again, we cannot depend on something coming from outside Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
So if we can have the technology, I think that's the way to go.
Okay. Now you mentioned using graphene, which is, I think, taken out from graphite. So you had a recent venture with Ceylon Graphene Technologies. Tell us a bit about this.
Right. So this all began as a research project at Slintech. We all know research and development is a highly risky business, because at the beginning you never know what you will end up with.
Yeah.
Because you might have all the ideas, you might have proven your concepts, but producing a prototype and then scaling up is a massive work. It's a challenging work. So it initiated as a research project to convert graphite into graphene and other graphene derivatives. So in graphite is a very common thing.
Yeah.
Every kid uses graphite in their pencils.
Yeah.
And we have been exporting graphite for a long time, for hundreds of years. So that's good, because that's the industry that we have developed within the country, and there are many other applications that we can use graphite for. At the same time, we should focus on adding value to graphite, because we are exporting graphite for about $6 per kilo.
Okay.
But when you convert that into graphene and other graphene derivatives, you can increase the value of it, maybe up to $5,000 per kilo.
Okay.
So that has a huge value proposition, because graphene itself has two main properties. The first thing is the strength. It has a very high strength.
Okay.
So you can use it as a composite material. You can improve the strength of a composite which has been used in an automobile, while decreasing its weight. The second thing is the conductivity.
Okay.
Thermal and electrical conductivity. So with those properties, you can use these in battery applications. So we came up with a patent, a US patent, to convert graphite into graphenes and other graphene derivatives. And then we formed a joint venture with another private sector entity. Now the JV is Ceylon Graphene Technologies Private Limited.
Okay.
The ultimate goal is to convert graphite into graphene and other value-added derivatives of graphene in large scale. And then we have two options. We can either use this graphene, because graphene itself is another raw material for several other industries,
Okay.
such as battery applications or in sensors. It can use as a composite filler for composite materials. So we are doing research on that, and we can initiate many other industries, or be a springboard for many other industries. At the same time, we can export these graphenes to other countries at a very high value.
Okay. So just like graphite, are there any other substances which are found abundantly in Sri Lanka, which we can make use of?
Of course, we have ilmenite, ilmenite sand. So ultimately, if you can convert it into titanium dioxide and then into titanium, there's a very high potential for very good business, because titanium is it has a very high strength and the weight is very low. So that's the metal which is being used in aircrafts.
Okay.
So there is a high value proposition. So that's what we should target for.
All right. And it's always good, like you mentioned, not just to depend on imports, but to manufacture things ourselves as well, and be ready for whatever is to come in the future.
I'll take another example.
Yeah.
Recently, we developed a sensor which can be attached to your mask.
Okay.
And this sensor detects the mask, whether the mask is fitted very well, and what your breathing rate is, and whether there's a high carbon dioxide concentration building up inside your mask. Then it alerts you. So it's basically used for monitoring your health conditions.
Okay.
Believe me, the sensor material that we used in this sensor is from graphene.
Okay.
So the raw material for graphene is graphite. So that's a high-tech product. And those are the products that we should target for if we want to increase our exports, because we know that there's a huge gap between our imports and exports. But exporting high quantity, low value products is not a solution for Sri Lanka, because we don't have a chemical industry here. We get all the raw materials from other countries. So exporting low value raw materials is not low value products is not a solution. We should target for high value, high tech products. And it would be really it's really nice if you can use local raw materials for the production of these high-tech products. So there is a potential, there's a very high potential, and we have proven that.
Great. Now, when it comes to implementing change, it really differs from country to country depending on cultures and people's beliefs. Now, when it comes to implementing some of these changes in Sri Lanka, what are some of the challenges you faced, and what did you do or what are you doing to overcome them?
Okay, one of the first challenge is doing research in Sri Lanka, because again we had to find money to do research. Funding is the main thing, because whether we like it or not, we need money to do research. And if you want to really do high-tech research, you need to have facilities. For example, now we do research on battery materials. We are trying to improve the performances of these batteries, but in the country we don't have many battery testing facilities. So every time that when we want to test these materials that we produce, we have to send it outside.
Okay.
It takes time and money. So the basic facilities are missing for research and development in Sri Lanka. And I'll give you another example. We developed a product, a spray, which has antiviral properties during COVID time. And we launched it with another private sector entity.
Okay.
But in the country, we don't have a viral testing facility. So when we wanted to test its activity against virus, we had to send it to the United Kingdom. And it took time and it took money. And one sample cost, the cost for one sample is about 1 million rupees.
And when you send it out of the country, is there a chance that they can sort of steal the idea as well?
That's the other challenge that we have. There's a very high risk, because these labs are well established and they can always reverse engineer the technology.
Okay, so I guess we have a long way to go when it comes to making the base and the foundation to be able to test some of these things, because I see a lot of potential in Sri Lanka, and like you mentioned, we have a lot of substances in Sri Lanka as well, so it's always good to make use of what we have here at home.
Exactly. The innovation has to be a national policy, right? So you should come up with all the support, industry support systems to encourage the researchers and the research that we do in Sri Lanka, because we have a very nice human capacity here. We have all the human resources with expertise, and if we give the right support to them, we can come up with very good high-value intellectual properties.
Okay. Now, when it comes to going green, we see a lot of countries around the globe. I mean, everyone is in a race to go green, and some countries are ahead of the other, and vice versa. How do you think Sri Lanka is really coping up with this transition? How far is Sri Lanka from going green completely?
Right. In that case, we have to think about several aspects. So it's not just energy, although energy is the central thing, and everything goes around energy, because for every other production, every other process product, we need energy. So energy is very important. And then we have to mainly think about the food, water, energy nexus. So then the agriculture, because agriculture plays a huge role when it comes to the environmental concerns, because we have taken some steps, even in the recent history, to stop or to reduce pollution due to agriculture. But it has to be very strategic, and it has to be very realistic. For example, we have developed a fertilizer which is called a nano fertilizer, which is a solid material. And there what we have done is we have produced a nanoparticle, a hydroxyapatite nanoparticle, and coated urea molecules around that. So when you just put urea into a plant, what happens is only about 28 to 30% gets absorbed by the plant, and the rest gets evaporated, or it goes to the water bodies and pollute it. So we are failing in terms of environmental aspects as well as in the economic aspects. But if you can improve the efficiency of absorption, that's the way to go. So with the product that we developed, for which we got about 3 US patents, the plant absorbs 48% of urea. So what happens is the nanoparticle slowly releases the fertilizer molecules, and the plant can absorb that. So that's the way of going green, because for the production, it may not be done in Sri Lanka, the production of urea, but it may be done somewhere else in the world, but we contribute it, right? Whenever you produce these materials in large scale, you use energy and you burn fuel. That means you're polluting the environment. So if you can reduce it, it's favorable in terms of economic aspects, especially for a country like us, and also environmental aspects. So that's one thing. And the energy, if you can go for renewable energy, that would be the ideal way. So if you can improve the ways to store this renewable energy, I think we can contribute a lot.
Great. I'd also like to ask you, how can Slintech actually contribute and help the nation's electric grid? How can Slintech make it more reliant and more secure?
Well, Slintech is a research and development center. So our mandate is to find solutions and develop intellectual properties which can be used by the industry. So there has to be support. First, to do research, we need funding, and then we need to have facilities to test the materials that we produce. And then there has to be an industrial partner who could take this forward. So Slintech is currently mainly focusing on, as I mentioned earlier, food, water, energy nexus. And then we are developing technologies. Some are funded by the internal resources, and then we build the technologies up to a certain extent. And after that point, we have to go for prototyping and then scaling up. So Slintech's mandate is to do research, development, and commercialization with an industrial partner. So it's not just another research institute where the research ends in a final report. Because Slintech is a public-private partnership, and by doing research, we just get money to manage the research work. In order for Slintech to survive, we need to find money through commercialization. That means whenever we develop an intellectual property, we either license it, either exclusively or non-exclusively, or we transfer the technology, assign the technology to another party, or we form a joint venture, just like in the graphene case, to take it forward. So that's Slintech's mandate, and that's Slintech's business framework. So we are geared to commercialize things. So that's the difference between Slintech and maybe other research institutes. So that's how Slintech contributes to the country.
All right. Well, we spoke about so many topics today, and you shared a lot of knowledge and insight when it comes to this industry. Before we wind up, I'd like to ask you, do you have any advice for the people of Sri Lanka?
Well, that's a big question. So in terms of the future, we all know that we have challenges at the moment. We have challenges in energy, and at the same time, we have challenges in finding foreign currency. So what we can do is, the only thing we can do is, either we can substitute imports, or we can increase our exports. So the industry has to be ready, has to be geared to align with innovation programs. And also there has to be government support as well. They have to incentivize the industry for doing research, because innovation is not an option. It's a mandatory thing that we have to do, and we have already realized that. So I think every student in the country, every undergraduate in the country, because we all use public money, right? Somebody else is paying for our degrees, and you should have that responsibility to serve back. So you should find a way, and the industry should support that efforts to come up with novel technologies, and industry should support to take it forward. So I think it's not just one category or one set of people who can change this. In this ecosystem, there are many stakeholders, and each and every person has their own responsibility to contribute to that effort.
Okay, thank you so much. That was Dr. Lakshitha Pahalagedara, the Head of Business Development of Slintech. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Prashant. Thanks.
And that winds up today's episode of Business Today. Do join us next week as well. Till then, have a good night.